Hello, BookTube. Bit of a surprise video here. The more I thought about it, the more the idea of letting one last shelf of history in this library tour just hang there until next week, the more I thought about that, the more it offended my Jesuitical sense of order. So I'm doing two library tours today to finish up not only this bookcase and not only this east wall entirely composed of history, but also this room. We'll be finishing this room this week, and then I will have the kind of the mental freedom to ponder how on earth I'm going to go about continuing with this. The little book room, which is the other place that we would go, isn't anywhere near as congenial for filming. It's a third the size, and it's crammed with books. But before then, I thought we'd just go through this last shelf of history. So once again, as I've been saying in this library tour, if you're not interested in history, there's nothing that's going to interest you here, except my pretty face. So we're going to start right away and try and keep this under control, and this will finish off this wall. Okay, all right, so this is John Adams' Republic by Richard Allen Ryerson, and it is a slightly oversized hardcover. I don't know if you can make that out. It's a little bit bigger than a normal hardcover, and it's terrific. The best analysis of John Adams' presidency, his thought, his writing that I've ever read. And probably understandably, because this author was forever and ever, and has forever and ever been in charge of the Massachusetts Historical Society's body of papers on John Adams. So he knows the individual works. He knows the basis for analyzing John Adams better than anybody in the world. Adams is a twisted knot of a problem for people studying the founding fathers. I know you're going to suspect me of bias here, but there's no one else like him. There's no one else even close. And I think that might account, it's a little shameful, but I think that might account for why there are 50,000 books on Thomas Jefferson, who's fairly easy to understand. His misty-eyed defenders notwithstanding, he's fairly easy to understand. And only a fraction of that many on John Adams. So I highly recommend this one. It is tremendous. Everything that those of us who maybe were hoping that this author would sooner or later write a big book, it's everything we could have hoped for. Oh, great. Oh, fantastic. There's another thing, another lack here that I was worried about. These are old National Geographic hardcovers. Some of you will have grown up with these things, and certainly you've seen them at yard sales and library sales and whatnot. This one is Greece and Rome, Builders of Our World. It's a National Geographic hardcover that comes with just lavish with artwork, and not just they have maps too, but not just frescoes and statues and whatnot, but also commissioned artwork. Here are Romans fighting Hannibal's troops in a commissioned painting, and a lot of times, there's Hannibal himself. A lot of times in these books, the original paintings will run throughout the book. Oh, and also in National Geographic style, they also take you to the modern incarnations of the areas. And it just go through here. This, for instance, this volume on Greece and Rome, what have we got here? In terms of chapters, the organization is never very challenging. The writing, of course, is really good, really clear, really engaging, but not scholarly. You don't go to these books for that. You go to them for the wonderful overview. There's the world of Odysseus, the world of Pericles, the world of Alexander, the Etruscans, the world of Hannibal, the world of Caesar. Very, 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 very enjoyable. I used to have all of these. They are a joy to revisit. I have Greece and Rome, and I also have the Renaissance, which does the exact same thing. Takes you through, I believe the Renaissance volume has less in the way of original artwork, just because it doesn't need it. I mean, the Renaissance is flooded with artwork of its own. I'm not seeing any original artwork in here. Look at that, though. Look at the beauty of the photography. Good Lord. I used to have all of these things, and I kind of wish I did now. I certainly at a yard sale now, if I saw them, I would grab them in a heartbeat. I think the only other one I have, I have a 2-volume one on birds that is just incredible. Just incredible. And that, of course, is in the little book room. And I think I have the one on Vikings, and that, of course, is in the little book room. But there used to be one on Shakespeare's England, and I don't have that anymore. I wish I did, and a bunch of others. There was one on the Middle Ages. But anyway, so I have at least these two. So that's great. And they were down here this whole time. All right. Okay, this next one is Godfrey Hodge. This is a great and godly adventure. This is a slim but very enjoyable sort of eyes wide open debunking and dusting off of the myth of the Pilgrim founding of America and whatnot. I'm not the only book that we've seen on that subject. We've seen a couple of them. They should be together, of course, but this one is tremendously enjoyable and very wry, which I like. I like it when historians remember that they have more of a duty incumbent on them than simply covering their research. You're supposed to tell a good story. Okay, all right. Well, that wasn't intended as a setup, but we come now to somebody who never for an instant forgot to tell a good story. Oh my. And talk about something you're going to see at yard sales. That's what breaks my heart about some of these older books, these mid-20th century books, is that they don't have a vogue. They didn't start a school. They were popular histories. They were never meant to be anything more than that. They're never going to be reprinted. So the only way you're ever going to see them, probably, is when somebody dies and their attic gets cleaned out. And you go to a yard sale or a library sale or a flea market or whatever, and you see a whole bunch of them, and they're all dusty, and maybe they smell a little of old wood and old dust, all those old book smells you all claim to love so much. And the thing that breaks my heart is that if you are not aware of these books, if you've never made their acquaintance, your eye is going to pass right over them when you're at those sales. You're going to be looking for a surprise cheap copy of a Madeline Miller novel. And as good as those are, you're going to miss out on an absolute Aladdin's cave of joy. And this is a perfect example. I've praised this author on this channel before. This is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. This is Thomas Costain. This is his book, The Three Edwards. But I also have The Conquerors and The Magnificent Century. And if I remember correctly, didn't we have another one of his here as well? Didn't we, in this library tour, just on this wall? Didn't we see The Last Plantagenets? I think we did. And they should be, of course, all of Costain should be together. But these are incredible reading. They're just incredible reading. And you won't know it if you see, I mean, I sort of cleaned these up, but if you see these, in ratty, old, dimmed condition at a yard sale, you would never guess how good they are. They are so good. They are so enjoyable. So I guess I'll make this one last pitch. I don't think there's any Costain in the little book room, so it's all out here. We've encountered a transverse book. Oh, well, here you are. Well, why aren't you with your brethren? I'm sorry, I talked my books. We at the beginning of this at the beginning of this book, this history incursion, we encountered The King's War and the King's Peace by C.V. Wedgwood. The King's Peace, a massive overview of the England of Charles I, and the King's War, of course, the war between Parliament and the King. And I said at the time that there was a third volume called A Coffin for King Charles, and here it is. Now, this is not in the Penguin trade paperback, the same one as I have the other two, and I wish it were. This is an old Book of the Month Club, which you can still see. You can at used bookstores, the Brattle bookstore here in Boston, you can often still see the whole of the Book of the Month Club thing. Not just this volume, but the other two as well. And I'm glad that I have this, although I want it in the Penguin trade paperback companion to those other two. Nothing against the book, of course. The book is incredible. Just a moment by moment, trial transcript, accurate account of a king on trial for his life, denying the whole time that anyone in the room has the right to try him for anything, and yet never losing his composure either. It's his accusers in the courtroom who lose their composure over and over again. There is no way. I'm not meaning to get into British politics here. I'm not meaning to get into politics at all. But I don't believe there's any way for you, no matter what your political leanings are, to read A Coffin for King Charles and feel sympathy for anyone other than Charles. I don't think Wedgwood did. And I don't think that the transcripts of the trial admit any other reading, whether he was a tyrant or not. Fantastic. Oh, good. All right, this is much more recent. This is Neil Faulkner's Lawrence of Arabia's War. Nice big thick thing. That is a great companion. I've read a lot on Lawrence of Arabia. I've read all the biographies. I've read his book. I don't know how many times. It's one of my favorite books. And I still like to read other historians. I mean, I get most of what I know about Lawrence of Arabia's exploits. I know from reading biographies of him, from reading a great biography of King Faisal, and memoirs of other people involved at the time. But I also love reading historical studies, even though some of them are really bad. There's one called With Lawrence in Arabia that's I really ought to have it. It's one of the better ones of the bunch, and this one is terrific. But a lot of them aren't. So I read them anyway. Lawrence being a larger-than-life figure, even though he only came up to about my mid-chest, being a larger-than-life figure, he calls forth from the ranks of hack historians some absolutely awful stuff. Just absolutely awful writings. Just syrupy garbage of the worst kind. If you are new to the subject and you find Lawrence interesting, feel free to email me. I'm at st.donahue@gmail. Feel free to email me so that I can steer you around some of the ones that have very wide print runs, so they will be the ones you will see in your bookstore, but that aren't worth your time. But anyway, let's... okay. All right. Well, you're not in the best of shape, are you? I mentioned, I think yesterday, or maybe earlier today, I mentioned that I am I have sorta kinda been interested all along in how history, as it slowly makes its way, how history deals with the Reagan administration. And I've been collecting, in an offhand way, not anything like the way that I do with some other subjects, but it will eventually reach that point, I'm sure. I've been collecting books on that subject, and this is one of the fundamental books on that subject. And this is Gary Will's, this is Reagan's America, Innocence at Home, which has been, I think when it was reprinted, it was retitled to just Innocence at Home, or just Reagan's America, one or the other. But Wills did a fantastic book called Nixon Agonistes, and a less fantastic book on the Kennedys, but his book on this look at Reagan and at the miasma that filled the country when Reagan was president. I don't agree with maybe, I'd say probably 45% of it, but I love it. Just love it. I just love it. You have to have it. If you're looking at Reagan, and especially at the historiography of Reagan, you have to have this book. All right, we have a trade paperback here. Oh, great. All right, this is Peter Judson's The Habsburg Empire. There is our doomed couple. Look at that. So this is a trade paperback from the Belknap Press of Harvard University Press. They're pretty good. As far as academic presses go, they're pretty good with getting me the trade paperbacks of the big scholarly stuff. We saw the Middle Ages, and there have been others in this thing too. Them and Yale are very good at getting me the trade paperbacks. I don't know that I am blurbed on this, but I loved this book. No, all right, I've got tons of reviews in it, but I don't have a blurb on the book. But as far as a study of the Habsburgs, it takes its place. I mean, the Habsburgs have called forth some great writing over the years. And hello, baby. What's this? Hello. I'm going to view it as a coincidence that I was talking about the Habsburgs when she shut up. Because that is a Habsburg face. Oh, baby. Oh, baby. Oh, your fans are going to be happy to see you. When I'm in puppy territory, this is a risk that we run. She has fully recovered from her experience of having an author here at Hyde Cottage, a very enterprising, very brave author, made his way over here, and we had a talk about his book. I posted the video in two parts because the phone cut out at one point in the video, but it was a terrific talk, and the visit exhausted Frida because she went nuts. She went nuts when he arrived, screaming her head off at him, and then she paused when we were talking amongst ourselves, and then when he looked at her again, she started screaming again. So he started saying, "Oh, now the key is not to look at her. Don't make eye contact." My little Habsburg. All I could think was how that interview would have gone if it had been 4 or 5 years ago, and it was, instead of Frida, who hadn't been born yet, it was my girls in their old age. I mean, it was awkward and funny to have a little puppy screaming her head off at a guest. It would have been awkward and not so funny to have people urinating, especially urinating on the couch. But anyway, let's move on. This is what makes these videos long. We can't pause for puppies. Okay, all right. This is another big scholarly trade paperback. This one's from Yale. This is Carlos Ayers' Reformations. Big fat book on what the subtitle refers to as the early modern world, 1450 to 1650. Essential, just terrific stuff. So glad. I knew that I got rid of the hardcover. I wasn't quite remembering that they sent me a paperback. That's great. I hope that keeps happening. I do, because I get these great histories, these great big new histories, and somebody emails me or is here and says, boy, I'd really like that, and I tend to give it to them, and then I'm without it. So I'm hoping that these paperbacks keep getting to me. Okay, all right. Well, this belongs with the other book on the subject. This is Reagan's Legacy in a World Transformed, edited by Jeffrey Chidster and Paul Kengor. It's a thin thing. It's a collection of essays about the intellectual, if you want to call it that, moral and political legacy of Ronald Reagan, and it's cherry picking, complete cherry picking. The people involved, the essay writers involved, intentionally step around the aspects of the Reagan legacy that are poisonous, that are awful, and concentrate instead on the ones that comparatively anyway aren't. It's okay. I heavily annotated it, but I held on to it. And then what have we got here? Oh, all right. This is Mary Lee Sarratt. This is The Collapse. Look at that cover. That is a Soviet soldier looking through a crack in the Berlin Wall. And this is all about, it's not just about the collapse of the Soviet Union, because it's a thin thing. Instead, it's about the actual moments when it happened, the accidents, the chain of accidents, miscommunications, and a couple of moments of genuine empathy that caused it to happen, that caused this cascade effect to happen. It wasn't a grand governmental sweeping pronouncement. It was one official making a mistaken pronouncement at a press conference, and the flash fire that caught on from there. And this book dramatizes that sequence of events. It's keyhole history, definitely. Because in the very much broader sense of the term, you don't really need to know any of that. If you have, for instance, this Robert Service book on the end of the Cold War, then you don't really need to know the exact time of that exact wording of that exact press conference, but it's fascinating. It's a fascinating story anyway, and I really liked how it was done. I can't remember if I reviewed The Collapse, but if I did, of course, with that and with everything else, anything that I reviewed, I will leave links to. Okay. All right, well, I was worried, but I need not have been. Here is Team of Rivals by Doris Kearns Goodwin. This is about her incredibly famous book about Abraham Lincoln and his contentious cabinet, every member of whom thought they could do a better job at being president than Lincoln could. And this is just that. So it's the same lovely physical design, big, heavy, wonderful, ornate book that I just love. I confess, as some of you pointed out when we were doing the biography tour, and noticed that I only have, I think, 1 or 2 books on Abraham Lincoln. I am so averse to the unbelievable amounts of hagiography that attach to Abraham Lincoln that I tend to avoid books about him. Even the ones that look sober at the beginning usually tend to devolve into, he was a creature too good for this world, he was an angel in human form, he was Christ come to earth again, etc., 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 etc. Now, I have heard rumors that in 2020 there is a big Lincoln biography coming that is specifically intended to combat that. So, are you back? You're back. Ooh. 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 Back. Sure. Sorry, it's the risk you run when we're down here. When we're down here in puppy territory, it's the risk you run. I don't know if that book will happen. There have been books that have sort of kind of attempted that. Team of Rivals is not an example of that. The Lincoln in Team of Rivals is a very earthy, very human person with lots of flaws. That's one of the reasons I love the book so much. There are a couple of other reasons that have to do with the redemption arc of the author herself. But one way or another, here, what are you doing, Frida? Now she's just making trouble because I'm talking to the camera instead of playing with her, even though I'm in her space. But we're almost done. So let's continue here. Okay, all right. This next one you may have seen on the channel of my fellow OGBG, my fellow. Well, right now at the moment, the stars have aligned on YouTube, and 4 crusty old bookworms are all doing library tours of their enormous library collections. Mine is actually by far the smallest of the 4. There's Todd's Bursting Bookcase, and I don't think that we or Todd's long-suffering wife or anybody knows how many books he has. I don't think there's ever been an accurate scientific estimate. And then there's Jason Harrigan, who's fairly new to BookTube, but it doesn't feel that way. I'm sure you've all had the exact same experience. If ever it was a case for, I'm on this channel, I'm always urging people, just turn on your computer, the camera on your computer, or turn on your phone and give it a try. Even if you don't think it's for you, give it a try. I think you're really going to like it. The experience of being on BookTube, I think you're really going to like it. I'm forever telling people that, and I'm willing to sort of wince and look the other way when their first few videos are awkward. But Jason's a perfect example of someone who's just a complete natural to be on BookTube. I think a lot of you are. I think it's a thing that dyed-in-the-wool bookworms always feel, which is this, and often for the last 4,000 years haven't been able to satisfy, and that is the urge to sit and chat with fellow book people. Get their recommendations, air your grievances, disagree, poke fun, lust over the books on the shelves that they have that you don't have. I think we could all enjoy that, and I have bravely blazed the trail of zero production quality. So if I can do it, then there's a precedent for you also to have zero production quality. In Jason's library, he doesn't have zero production quality, although every time I watch a video of his and he is in that watery, half-hearted, let's just call it off and have darkness at 2 in the afternoon Irish light, I get a pang. As I used to live on the west coast of Ireland, and the light was like that almost all the time. The days that were glorious were so rare that it was almost enough to lift the habitual melancholy of everyone around me. but his books are very orderly behind him. They're on shelves behind him, and they're all in preservative wrappers and whatnot. And Mark Richardson at Richardson Reads is a librarian, and his books are fairly neatly organized. They're fairly neat on their shelves. Todd and I are the ones who are far more prone to the kind of chaos that you see creeping behind me. But you may have seen this book on Mark's channel. Mark has embarked on an epic library tour of his own. Now, those of you who know his channel will have probably been introduced to it by his epic library tour a couple of years ago. And now, with a little bit of nudging, he has agreed to do another library tour. Your library is constantly in a state of seismic flux, so it won't be the same library tour at all. And also another key thing to point out is if you're doing this whole reading thing right, you won't be the same either. But this book has appeared on his channel lately because he has this habit of he has a job and he's a parent. He's got all these kinds of responsibilities. I don't advocate that at all. I'm not even wearing pants. but he has this habit, I think it's probably a life-saving habit, of having books going in different places in the old farmhouse. He lives in an ancient farmhouse. And so that when the whirlwind of his day drops him down at some point or other, there will be a book within reach that he is working on at the moment. And this is one of them, or was recently one of them. This is Boswell's London Journal, which is not nearly as well known as his Life of Samuel Johnson, of course, but is far more readable, far less intimidating, because it's not 1,800 pages long, and hilarious. Just hilarious. Boswell is very much a chronicler, a journal keeper in the Samuel Pepys mode of writing things that you read it and you think, why on earth did you commit that to paper? You're a professional man. You have a public face. You have a family, friends, a father, famously ill-tempered father. Why on earth are you committing these things to paper? This would be slander if it came from anyone but you. And yet, as with the case in Pepys, I'm endlessly grateful that he did. It's just it isn't what it looks like at all. You look at a cover like this or other covers that it's had, and you just wouldn't guess at the delights that are in here. Because Boswell is you. Boswell is me. Boswell is us. Boswell very often was not wearing pants. This is history, historical writing that blows apart the typical idea of historical writing as staid and boring. So I have it as well. I wouldn't do without Boswell's journals. They're great. Actually, this person, the person who did this, Frederick Pottle, did a whole slew of these. Johnson at the bar, Johnson searches for a wife, Johnson this, Johnson that. There are a whole slew of them. And I only have this one volume. The London Journal is by far the best, by far the most enjoyable and concentrated of them all. But they're all enjoyable. And they do regularly show up at the Brattle, so I'm keeping an eye out for them now. Okay. All right, this next one is by Stefano Daglio. It was translated by Donald Weinstein. And it's called The Duke's Assassin, Exile, and Death of Lorenzino de Medici. Terrific melodramatic cover. This is from Yale. And this is about Lorenzino assassinated Duke Alfonso of Florence and then fled. And this recounts the assassination, and it recounts the manhunt for him. He was eventually found and killed. And in the course of doing that, I mean, I would have wished that this would be much longer. It's a very big, florid story. But in the course of narrating that crime and the premeditation ahead of it and the manhunt, you also get a big swath of the world of the forming, Florentine Renaissance. Just a fascinating study. Okay, all right, great. Okay, this one has a glassine cover, almost like it came from Jason Harrigan's library, but I haven't been there, so I'm not guilty. This is someone we've seen before. This is Mary Beth Norton in The Devil's Snare. She has a new book coming out next year, 1774, about the American Revolution. This is her great book on the Salem witch trials. So glad that I have this. I was certain that I didn't when we'd gone so long in this tour and I hadn't seen it. But this is, we saw Stacy Schiff's book, The Witches. This is another great book on the Salem witch trials. No harm in having more than one, that's for sure. Okay. Okay, I need to set this aside and reinforce it and also reread it. This is nonfiction from George Higgins, who is famous for his fiction. He's famous for The Friends of Eddie Coyle, a great Boston novel, a great crime novel. This is nonfiction. This is The Friends of Richard Nixon, which has this great cover, Nixon and his crew as gangsters at bay. And this is scathing. It is absolutely brilliant. It is absolutely wonderful. And it's all about a criminal president. It couldn't be more relevant than it is right now, because we are headed into an impeachment process. Here in America, we are impeaching another president. A major thing. And not, if you're looking at it from the outside, or even if you're looking at it from an extremely partisan view here in America, not a partisan thing. It's not a light thing. The Democratic leadership in the House of Representatives has been fighting against this whole thing for a long time. But it is actually a legal responsibility of Congress. It's not just a political ploy. If Congress sees the executive branch committing a crime, Congress is obliged by the Constitution to act. So I'm going through another presidential impeachment. And this is all about, for instance, there's a great section here on perjury. We're going to hear a lot about perjury once actual sworn testimony starts to be taken. We're going to hear perjury a lot. It's going to come up in the news every day. The statute, which prescribes perjury before grand juries and courts, also provides for perjury before congressional committees. and every other body conducting proceedings in which the law authorizes the taking of testimony under oath. You can't commit perjury by accident. The statute says the liar has to do it on purpose. He must hear a question which asks for the subject matter, as Mitchell might say, material to the investigation underway. He must swear to the contrary, and know he is swearing to the contrary, and intend to swear to the contrary, and sit there. It's not necessary for the offense, but it sure as hell necessary for the fellow who plans to prove the offense was committed, barefaced, hoping to goodness that the interrogator swallows the whopper, because the witness or some buddy of his will be in serious trouble if the questioner starts laughing. And there's also a bit here, I think I've read it before when I mentioned this book. There's also a bit on obstruction of justice. The President of the United States, the current President of the United States, is already an unindicted co-conspirator in a case of obstructing justice. Obstruction of justice has come up in connection with his name and the crimes of his administration many, many times, and will come up many more times now that there is an official impeachment inquiry. And there's a bit here that's so bitingly succinct about whether or not Richard Nixon was obstructing justice, and whether or not anybody knew it. There were, as a matter of fact, plenty of people who said or strongly implied that the president was doing exactly that. And he was. But the people who said it could not prove it, and the people who could have proven it were busy helping him do it. So I need to reinforce this book. It's just got a normal paper dust jacket, and then reread it. And that is the end of the history. The only thing that's left here is I noticed underneath this bookcase, there's a little space between the bookcase's bottom shelf and the floor. There are a whole bunch of kids' books, which I'm not getting rid of. There's Found. There's this one. This one broke my heart. Found Dogs. All about rescue dogs. John and Dee, this is Life on Mars. And that cover says it all. A little boy is on a field trip to Mars, and none of his classmates see that they all assume he's on Mars alone. He's not with his classmates. He's on Mars alone, and he's exploring to see if there's life. And he doesn't see any life at all. And that's because he's just missing it. He's just missing at every step. He's just missing, and the life starts to get a little peeved. The Martian starts to get a little peeved that he's not being seen. Delightful. Okay, this is Creepy Pair of Underwear about a little bunny rabbit who does not want to give away. He does not want to get rid of his underwear, and one of his pairs of underwear has other ideas on the subject. It's very delightful, and also, like a lot of children's kids books, picture books, it addresses a vital point. At some point or another, if you have a little boy, you're going to have issues with underwear. Other than Bedtime for Yeti. Yeti has a little Yeti. My Pillow Keeps Moving, about a grumpy old man who goes into the shop to buy a new pillow, but a dog who desperately wants a home imitates a pillow, and it is taken home and moves all around. And the guy takes him back to the shop and says, "I bought a pillow here and I think it's broken." And the employee of the month says, "What seems to be the problem, sir?" And he says, "My pillow keeps moving." And the guy says, "Sir, is your pillow soft?" "Yes." "Is your pillow fluffy?" "Well, yes." "Then your pillow is not broken, sir. Would you like a sticker? I am a happy pillow place customer." And he just puts up with it. The guy just says, "All right, well, I guess I don't have a case, so I will keep it." Oh, it's delightful. All right, here's an older one. This is a Caldecott winner. This is the big snow, the first big snow of the season, back when those happened here in this part of the country. This Beautiful Day, but appreciating even a rainy day. And of course, the ultimate Steve book. the ultimate Steve book. Shark Dog, in which a young girl and her famous explorer father encounter an animal who is part dog and part shark. And there is I hope it's in this book, there is a visual that I have got to show you. Yes, because it involves a cat. Look at this visual. I wish I could see the next panel. All right, well, we didn't end on a scholarly note, because I have all these kids' books, and I'm not giving up. I wouldn't give them a lousy kid for all the tea in China. But that's it. Oh God, how long this video is. So that's it. We are now done with this room, with history, and with this room. We made it all the way around this room. Now I have to figure out what I'm going to do next. I think that now might be the time for me to buy one of those little tripods that have the grippy arms so that you can put it anywhere. So you don't have to lay it on anything flat. You can grip it onto a shelf, something like that. I think it might be time for me to spring the $20 to get one of those things. I think it might be time for me to buy my first piece of booktube equipment. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you so much for your patience. And we'll stop with the book tour for the weekend while I ponder. And then hopefully we'll pick it all back up again on Monday in the little book room. So I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.